Hey friends, it's Laura with Laura B. FlossTube. Welcome or welcome back. I'm so glad you joined me today. We will be continuing our series on the vintage quilt upcycle, recycle, repurposing projects. Today I have grabbed those end borders, and I told you in the deconstruction video that we would be making some makeup brush travel rolls with those. So that's what our project is for today. And just so you know what the end result is going to look like, we're going to have a travel roll that just looks just like this. So I'll go through all the steps, so don't worry about that. But then when you unroll it and you flip this top edge up, it will hold several makeup brushes. I'm also going to probably be using this a little bit for some eyeliner pencils and things like that. Just all those little things that you throw in a bag and then you can't find it when you need it when you're on vacation trying to get ready to go out to dinner. All right, so we're gonna need a few supplies for this. So let's go through the supplies list really quick. I'm using a vintage quilt border. So you're gonna want your piece to be 16 inches long and 10 inches wide, and that's gonna be the main part of the travel roll. And then for that pocket, you're gonna want another piece that is 16 inches long and 5 inches wide. And I'm gonna be using a couple different machines today. I've never used my serger on one of my videos, so this is gonna be a first. But I'm excited to show you just the advantage of using the serger with this project. And then in addition to that, you're going to need a sewing machine, some matching thread or complementary thread, your choice, and then one large button and a ponytail holder. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to roll out my border piece, and I'm going to cut those pieces that I need. And again, one of them is going to be 16 by 10, and then the other one is going to be 16 by 5. I'm not really that concerned about the 10 inches wide. If it's pretty close, it's going to be fine. You definitely want it to be, close to that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be exact. So this is the first thing we're going to cut is 16 inches long, and then we'll square it up with 10 inches wide. Now this is the end of the border, so I have two finished edges here. It's going to be, up to you if you want to cut this edge off. You don't necessarily need two finished edges. One is perfectly fine, and 0 is perfectly fine too, because as you'll see, we'll get all these edges finished before we're done making this project. Now I'm just going to flip this around a little bit just so I can get this nice and squared up. And it looks like I'm a little shy of that 10-inch mark, but again, that's going to be fine. So I just have this edge and this edge on the straight lines on my cutting mat. So I will square up this edge and we will be good to go. Now, as I said, you are going to need a second piece, and that piece is going to be 16 inches by 5 inches. And I actually have another piece left over from the first one that I made, so I'm going to go ahead and use it on this one. Now, it's up to you. There's a couple different ways you can do this, and this is where you just have to decide. Obviously, this quilt is pretty plain. I have a pink and a white, and since I cut these both off of the ends, I don't even have a full strip of pink here. If you wanted this pink on the outside of your travel roll, then obviously you want to put that together like that. If you want it on the inside, then you can flip it around. But this is your pocket. This is your main piece. So with that being said, the first thing we're going to do is just finish this top edge of this pocket, and we're going to do that with the serger. All right, so I am using a Brother Lock 1034D serger. I honestly don't know that much about sergers. I just know that when I want something to work, this one does it. So that's kind of where I'm at with sergers. There's definitely some good ones on the market. I got this one from a friend who was moving, and I have been very pleased with it. It's done everything I needed. But again, I don't focus on a lot of serging projects, but I am excited to show you this one today. Now I have found that I always like to sew a little past the end of the piece just to make sure that I have a tail and to make sure that it doesn't come unthreaded, because threading these things can sometimes be a chore. All right, so the next thing that I'm gonna do is grab my main piece, and this is where I would recommend that you use a few pins, but obviously be careful with that. With the serger, you don't want to run your pins through your machine. Now I have turned my piece around so the pink is on the bottom, and I've done that because I want this finished edge up top, and that was the side of my border. Now this edge does have some fraying to it, but I'm fine with that. I'm gonna leave it the way it is and just kind of maintain that vintage quilt feel. The one thing that I have learned with this project is that I want this to be on the outside, but that means I want it to be on the inside when I serge it together. So I'm gonna lay these right sides together, and then after we get done serging this, we're gonna flip that whole thing out, so this pocket will be on the inside and this will be on the outside. And for this, I am gonna serge 3 sides of this. So I'm gonna come all the way down this side, all the way across the bottom, and then all the way back up the other side. I will stop at the corners and cut my thread and then go again. Again, you may want to pin this in a few places just to make sure that nothing slips on you. I like to pin this lower corner. And the top where this is going to start from, or where I'm going to be, the pocket starts from. And then let's do this other corner over here. And again, make sure you stop and you remove these pins. Do not sew over these pins with your serger. That would not be good. Now, the thing that I love about the serger is that, see how this is like not quite even, but that's not gonna matter at all. So it's gonna cut that off when I get to it, and that is amazing. All right, so I'm gonna start in right here. All right, so that is all we're gonna do with the serger. And let me show you how to finish off these little tails. All right, so the thing with sergers is that this will just pull out if you're not careful. So you want to take and thread this tail back through a few of your stitches. So I have a very large needle with a very large eye. And you can also use a crochet hook. And then I'm just going to slip it under the thread, not through the fabric, but just under the threads. About an inch, inch and a half down the side. And then pull that tail through and cut that off. And you're going to do that with both, well, all 4 of the sides, but definitely the 2 tops. Now, this one, I left this tail a little short. So instead of threading the needle first, I'm going to slip the needle under these little threads. And then I'm going to thread the needle while it is in those threads. This is when having a needle with a very large eye comes in handy. And then I'll slip that down through. All right, so I have these other 2 corners to do, and then we will head over to the Juki. All right, the one other thing I'm going to do before I head over to the Juki is I'm just going to flip this out. And I'm going to use my scissors to poke out this corner if I can't get it with my thumb. And same thing with the other side. Now, I could definitely take this to the ironing board and give this a good little press real quick, and I may do that. Or I may just head to the sewing machine. This looks like it's going to flatten out pretty good. I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I'm using a vintage quilt that had several stains and issues with it, and it's very thin. So don't have to worry too much about being able just to finger press all these sides and things down. All right, so let's head to the Juki. All right, on the Juki, what we're gonna do is we're gonna make our little spots for all of our makeup brushes. And I have decided to do this a couple different ways. Over here on this white area, I'm just gonna follow these stitching lines that are for the border. And then as I get over here, I'm just gonna pick points to make my brush pockets. The first one of these I made, I actually just used the edge of my plate because that's really good for your large brushes. And then I used about half of the plate. This little mark here, it's like it says 20. I think it's 3/4 of an inch. There's 5/8 there, so that would 1 3/4 of an inch for the smaller ones. And that's worked out great. So that's kind of what we're going to do here. We are just going to follow these 4 lines to begin with and then space them on out for the rest of the pocket. All right, now this is when I'm going to start using my needle plate to make some spaces for some of my larger brushes. I like putting the larger brushes in the middle of the roll for some reason. I just think they fit better there, and the smaller brushes towards the ends. I don't really have a pattern together for this project. It's pretty straightforward, pretty easy. So just those couple pieces of quilt that I have cut out to make it is all you really need. You could definitely purchase some pre-quilted fabric as well. Let's see, I have 1, 2, 3. Let's do one more big one and then we'll do some smaller ones. Start a smaller pocket here. That edge is kind of bulky just because of all those layers of the quilt that you're going through. That's why you're seeing me kind of lift my presser foot a little bit more, just because it can't quite get high enough on its own. And I'm starting probably somewhere around 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and I'll show you why in just a moment. And then we're gonna go ahead and do, all right, so that's all the little seams for our makeup brushes to go across there. And now the other thing we're gonna do is we're gonna flip this over and we're gonna do a top stitch all the way around the outside edge, just to give that a nice finished look. We also have a lot of strings to cut off of here, but we're gonna start with that top stitch first. And I'm just gonna kind of roll this edge just to make sure that the white is showing on the outside on this edge and not just the pink. And again, I don't need to do the top stitch on this top side if I don't want to. So I'm gonna take this edge and fold back just that little edge that we have the serged stitching on, and that way it'll line up perfectly with my bottom pocket, and do a little top stitch there. Sometimes getting that started is a little tricky, so just be patient with yourself and your machine. And I'm just using the guide on my presser foot for where I want my stitching line to be. pulling that through just a little bit on where that pocket starts coming up. And then we're to the corner, so we'll do a little pivot. And sew right along the bottom. Now you're going through a lot of layers here, so just be patient. Again, you may need to help your machine a little bit. You're asking a lot from it. And again, just kind of roll that pink under so it doesn't show on the outside. And if it does, it's not the end of the world. Don't stress out over it. It's not going to affect the functionality of the finished product. And then again, I'm just rolling that selvage or that serged seam under to sew it down to the back. This corner might be tricky just because it's a border, but we'll do our best. All right, the last thing we're gonna do is we're going to grab one of our brushes. And I would say if you have makeup brushes that are like really long, you may want to double check the measurement. My brushes, I believe, are about 7 or 8 inches. All right, so I'm just gonna slip one of my brushes in here to the bottom. And then I'm gonna fold that over because I want this top will fold in when I roll it up. So it needs to be about right there. So let's see. And again, I love using my needle plate for things like this because then you don't have to measure everything. All right, so it looks like if I stitch right at the edge of my needle plate, then I will be good. So I just want to put a couple stitch lines here so it's easier to fold. It kind of gives the fabric a point to fold over those brushes. And I'm going to run 2 stitching lines all the way the length of this travel roll up. So there's one, and the next one I'm going to put in just a little bit further. And I'm going to use my presser foot again to judge that distance. So there's sort of a little split in my presser foot right there. And I will run it right along that first stitching line. I honestly love projects like this because you don't have to have a pattern and you can make them, you could make this longer or shorter, definitely wider if you want this flap to come over more over your brushes. And I'm talking about makeup brushes, but you could definitely make all the pockets narrower, and then you could use this for crayons or markers or colored pencils or any kind of like different art supplies, anything that you have that you want to have a place to store it and roll it up. You can obviously adjust the height of your pocket. So if you're doing crayons, you probably don't want it 5 inches. Maybe for markers, but not for crayons. All right, so the last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna make a decision on how we want this to roll up. And I think I want it to roll up with this other end showing, because I want some of that pink showing when it's rolled up. Yep, so I want it to look like this. So I'm gonna put my button right down here. And okay, so this is the one thing you have to keep in mind. This last little slot down here, you won't be able to use it for a brush because we're going to put a button there, and that's going to prevent anything from going in that spot. So just keep that in mind. It's not that big of a deal to me, but if you have, 15 brushes and you only make 15 spots, you're going to be sad because you're not going to have 15 spots. You're going to have 14 because of this button. Oh, this is always my fear, is that I'm going to break a needle putting a button on. Sometimes I forget and I don't try it first, but I remembered this time. And I am just using the button stitch on my machine, and I'm going to go twice in both places. I love my Juki for so many reasons, and this is one of them. All right, so let's take this over and fill it up and show it off. The one thing I didn't show you is that I'm going to use a knit ponytail holder and attach that around my button, and that's going to be what I secure my roll shut with. And this is going to serve a couple purposes, because that way if I'm out and I forget a ponytail holder, I will have one, and it's going to secure my makeup brush shut. So let's get all of our brushes in there. Don't judge me on the cleanliness of my brushes. I do know they need to be cleaned. All right, so now all I gotta do is flip this down and start rolling. And then I will grab my ponytail holder, flip it around, and I have a makeup brush travel roll. Thank you so much for joining me again. I appreciate your support. If you have any comments or questions, please leave those down below. I try to respond to comments within a couple of days, so I look forward to hearing from you. Until next time, I hope you find joy in all you do. Carve out some time for crafting and creating, and of course, happy stitching. Hey guys, I just want to let you know, if you love this project and you would like to have one of your very own, I will be listing some of these in my Etsy shop. The link to that is in the description box below the video. I'm also going to have some other projects coming up that we're using that vintage quilt to make, so be watching out for those as well.